Bryant. I'm 32 years old, a mother of three, a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm also a recovering addict. In order for you to understand who I am today, I will need you to know and understand who I used to be. I grew up in Augusta, Kentucky to a single mother that did her best to raise us. My biological father was always in and out of prisons and jails and made it clear at a young age to us that drugs were of more importance. At least that is how I saw it as a child, not experienced addiction myself yet. I had a hard time understanding much of what he did and how to process it, except to bury those feelings in emotional trauma. That seemed to be something I always did, bury bad or hard emotions. The things I saw as a child will always stay with me. My mother always worked, and when I was a newborn, one of the most amazing women I think I'll ever surely have known started babysitting me and my older brother. She became my mama and my mother figure. Her daughter became my big sister, and her husband became the father I always wanted and needed. They were my saving grace in so many ways and gave me the most normal and happy years of my childhood. God blessed me with them, and I wouldn't be able to tell my true story without at least mentioning them. My childhood was a typical childhood for the most part, besides my biological father popping in and out, until my innocence was stolen by a family member when I was just 5 years old. The abuse continued until I was old enough to say no. I've never told but a handful of people of this abuse until now, and I no longer hold ill will to that person, given they were themselves an abused child. And if there's one thing I've learned is that hurt people, no matter if it seems right or wrong, or if it's just learned behavior. Coming to these realizations and forgiveness took speaking about it in therapy and to my sponsor and God. I struggled with never not quite knowing who I was or what I was doing in life, and never knew my purpose, and I never felt good enough. We never attended church much, and I quit going altogether when I reached my teenage years. I fell in love at 13 years old, married young at 17, and also had my first child at 17, Hunter. It wasn't until after my firstborn was 6 months old that I started doing pain pills and partying more, and had become addicted before I knew it. In 2012, I had my second child, Hudson. After 2 short months with us, Hudson passed away due to SIDS. It was that day that I started hating God, and I would even go as far as to say not believing in him, because I didn't see how any kind of God could take an infant away, and I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that they made caskets that little. And it was the day that I laid my son to the ground that I lost my mind and my addiction and life spiraled out of control. I had 2 more children in the years of 2014 and 16, Hadley and Hayden, all while battling my silent and secret addiction and mental illnesses, because all I knew how to do after all was bury those bad emotions and numb them with my pills. I was arrested shortly after my son passed away for shoplifting, but it did not stop my addiction or mental state. I just went through the next years of my life numb with grief and the painkillers. In 2016, my marriage also fell apart due to the fact that both of us had changed after Hudson had passed, and we could no longer love each other because we no longer loved ourselves and were sick with grief and addiction. After my marriage fell, I began to be addicted to pain itself, and not only the drugs. It was a constant battle within myself to want to be happy, but to be so drawn to the pain at the same time. I didn't know how to fix this, and I didn't know how to ask for help, and I certainly did not have any sort of spirituality in my life at this point. I was just merely existing. I became the sole caregiver and provider for my 3 children. I was even more angry with God at that point, and I was scared to death. How could I care for these 3 children alone when I was secretly battling a demon within myself? In 2017, I entered into an abusive and narcissistic relationship that was fueled with drugs, mainly methamphetamine. Again, I was addicted to the pain, so that relationship fueled that need for it. No matter how much my family begged me to leave the relationship, I needed that pain. I couldn't tell them that, and at the point in my life, pain was the only thing that made me feel alive. I had forgotten how to be happy, or what even happy was. In 2020, when COVID hit and everyone was quarantined, that was when my addiction took the worst downward spiral that I could have ever imagined possible, and I became someone that I hated and wished nothing but death upon. I couldn't look myself in the mirror, and I had no idea who I was anymore, and I still had these 3 children to take care of, and I was failing. From the moment that I took my first injection of methamphetamine in March of 2020, it took only 6 months before I lost my mind completely. I lost my job, my car, my friends, and all sight of any good within me. In August of 2020, the state of Kentucky took custody of my 3 children and placed them in the foster care. When they walked them out the door that night, I just stood there in the doorway for hours, just staring into nothing. In those moments, something snapped in me. I felt all the good that could have been left in me sink away into this dark hole. It was this constant battle within my mind daily, saying, Ashley, what are you doing? Your kids need you. And then my addiction would fire back and tell me, you have nothing to worry about now, the kids are gone. You can do what you want. There wasn't a day that went by that I did not want to die, and made plenty of attempts of suicide but failed because I couldn't even do that right, I thought. And the only time I spoke to God in those days was when I was begging him to kill me. I had no idea what to do, where to go, how to ask for help, or to even admit that I had a problem. The pain, agony, anguish, and addiction had consumed me completely. It wasn't until I became homeless and living in a car, never eating, pushed away from my family, and doing unspeakable things just to get high, that I realized that I may have a problem. I attempted my first treatment in September of 2020, only to walk out 10 days in to continue with my addiction because the demon inside my head still had a stronghold, and I was still too weak to fight it off. At least I was too weak to fight it off alone. And that's where I always felt, completely alone, lost in this world with no hope, not knowing who I was. All I saw myself as was a failure and a junkie. I would lie, steal, cheat, manipulate anyone that I could. I had ran from ones that still loved me, and I had disappeared altogether to the point where my mother had to file a missing persons report on me because the turmoil I had caused in others was so unbearable I couldn't face them any longer. It wasn't until January of 2021 when the inevitable happened. I overdosed because fentanyl had been introduced into the methamphetamine I was injecting. Not knowing what had happened until I woke up to the person that was with me, sitting on top of me in the car, smacking me in the face and screaming my name, that I had realized something had to change, or that begging that I had done to God to die would surely come true. I realized maybe I didn't want to die, that maybe I was just sick, very sick. And then I finally admitted to myself that I was an addict, and I had not been mentally stable for a very long time, and I needed help. I entered my second treatment 4 days after I overdosed on January 30th of 2021. After leaving treatment, even though I was physically better and no longer had the drugs in my system and my brain was not clouded, I still felt sick and I did not know why. It wasn't until I went to Redeemed Outreach with Miss Pastor Paula Wilson. I sat there and listened to their worship uncomfortably, but not uncomfortable because of where I was, but because I was sitting there and feeling these feelings of needing God that I hadn't felt before. I needed him. I felt drawn to the altar, and that day I gave myself and my burdens to God. I've worked on my faith since then and washed away my sins when I was baptized in June of 2021. I started attending church here at Cross Point regularly, and I have come to realize that God never left me in those dark days. I was the one that left him. He was there for me the entire time. Once I'd given my life to God and I let go of the chains that were holding me back, everything started becoming more clearly. Then I finally started to heal and learn who I was. And the things that I had prayed for, God started showing me a way to receive them. I am now a year sober, and I have full custody of my children back. I have a home. I have a family and friends that love and can depend on and trust me again. And I can now teach my children about how gracious of a God we have, and he is a God of redemption and love. I know what it's like to be ran by that instinct inside you that sticks to the lie. I know what it's like to relive all the things that you've done till you wished you died. I know what it's like when you're waking up anxious and sick, and the logical thing is that fix. So you push all the things that you know you should do to the side because you just want to get high. But I also know what it feels like to wake up excited for life. When you make that decision within you to live, so you give all that's in you and you fight for your life. So who I am today is a soldier in God's army to help those still stuck in the fires, and a healed woman that knows what happiness is. I know what it is to smile a real smile, and I know what it is to be a mother, friend, sister, and daughter again. And most importantly, a child of God. And that with God in my life, I'll never have to feel alone again. My story isn't over yet because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you.